Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to thank and pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Hi everyone, and welcome to Room by Room, the Home Organisation Science Insights podcast, produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element, with expert knowledge from professionals in the field. I'm your host, Gabriella Joustra, coming to you from Naarm, Melbourne, Australia. Let's get started. Hi everyone, and welcome back to the show. Today I'm joined by Sally Hart, owner of Clever Closet Company, and today we're going to talk about wardrobe chaos. It's not you, it's the closet. Welcome, Sally. Thanks for joining the show.
Thanks for having me, Gabriella.
So I think the best way to get to know you is if you give a little bit of an introduction to yourself.
Oh, okay, sure. From a design point of view, I started a long time ago, back in the 80s, when wardrobes were just sort of becoming a bit of a thing. I think it was very influenced by women powering through the workforce and needing more clothing than they used to need, say, in the 50s when it was just a little dress and apron. And so built-in wardrobes became quite a thing. And gradually over time, the demands of that have really increased. So I went from, starting with a wardrobe company to ending up doing bespoke storage design in dressing rooms, wardrobes, and eventually all houses. So that's kind of the background on that. I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to know.
I don't think so, but we'll also get to know you a little bit better in our section called Have You Met Sally? So have you, do you have a favorite book?
I'm not a great reader, but I do like audiobooks, and recently enjoyed reading a book called Happy, which I think was by, or listening to, which I think is by, I think his name's Dan Brown. And it was just a moment in time where a few miserable things were happening, and I just thought, oh, that sounds good. And it was, I thought it was going to be a bit dull, a bit of a self-help, but I loved it in the end because he actually has a lot of philosophy similar to mine, which is actually don't just be happy with what you've got, just be content and realize, how much there is to be grateful for. And it was really uplifting. I really enjoyed that.
That's great. It's so good to have a book that is unexpected, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. And something new, I think, as well. I don't know. I like finding new books all the time.
Yeah.
Do you have
It was
any?
a good thing
Do you
to,
have
it was a
any?
good thing to, sorry. It was
Sorry,
a
no.
good
Go
thing to do
ahead. Go
while I
ahead.
was I was renovating and painting my house. So it was a great thing to do while I was doing that.
Mm-hmm. That sounds good. Yeah. Do you have any hobbies?
I do have hobbies. I have the pleasure of living in a very beautiful environment surrounded by nature. So I really enjoy working outside in the garden and just sort of doing a bit of bush regeneration. I have a permaculture garden, so that's a lovely thing to work in with the chickens, and I've got wallabies all around here. So I do that, wildlife rescue, and would like to get back into golf and a little bit of painting at some point. Things did when I had a little bit more time.
What's permaculture?
Permaculture it's a philosophy. It was established in Australia around about the 70s. It's quite popular worldwide. It's really kind of like a hippie version of gardening, where theoretically, and I don't subscribe to all of the beliefs, but theoretically they believe a garden should be able to sustain itself. So working with nature, basically growing the things that will grow easily and naturally in the environment, and increasing as much biodiversity. So by encouraging lots of insects, companion planting. So this plant grows well with that plant and will actually help to defend its parasites and diseases if you do this complementary planting, and just keeping the system maintaining itself, having plants that are self-seeding so that it regenerates and it's kind of trying to create a whole ecosystem. It's great in theory. It doesn't necessarily, it's not necessarily as productive as you might like to think, but it's a lovely way to approach gardening.
I guess if it's supposed to sustain itself, then what's the point of the gardener?
Well, you might need to make seasonal changes. So plants still have their cycles. So theoretically, yes, if everything was self-seeding, but if you think back to the days where people did nomadic gardening, you can't just continue to, the ground won't keep reproducing unless there are some changes and, circulating and changing your crops, rotating, and seasonal changes. So yeah, and also you might want to plant things that you actually like to eat. So you might influence it with your own preferences.
True, true. That's so interesting. I've heard of it, but I didn't know there was a name, I guess.
Yeah.
Hmm. So you mentioned you listen to audiobooks. Do you also listen to podcasts?
Yes, I do. I'm a very big podcaster. Because also I do enjoy running and taking my dog for a walk. So it's a fun thing to do while you're doing those activities. My favorite, actually, going through a second time, is by Matt Bevan of ABC Radio. Russia, if you're listening. Started back in the looking into the corruption and the Russians being involved in the Trump election, and there's been a whole sequence of going through corruption there, and issues in China, Australia, and now we're back to Russia again. So really informative, very interesting behind the scenes stuff that's divulged through those podcasts.
I think it's very current at the moment. We want to know what Russia is doing.
Yeah, very, very interesting stuff.
Mm.
I'd highly recommend it.
Okay, I'll have to have a look. Do you have a role model?
Well, David Attenborough. um, he's been my idol all my life. So yeah, I'd probably leave it at that.
Um, okay.
No, I don't
And
mean
do you have?
to stop. There's yeah. There's not a
Oh,
lot of
okay.
people I really aspire to, but yeah.
Why do you look up to him?
Well, I think that he has been able to connect with people at many levels. From this great, simple appreciation of nature. I mean, he didn't start out as an environmentalist. He didn't even start out interested in nature. He was just happened to be, on the television scene doing other things. But I just think the way he, I guess really was at the vanguard of nature documentaries, studying things up close and having an appreciation for the whole world around us and just the beauty. And I think through that, it's a wonderful thing for us to all be able to go and see what's happening up close in all areas of the world, under the ocean and in the atmosphere, right out to Antarctica, without needing to go there ourselves. It's pretty amazing.
I spent a lot of my childhood watching his documentaries, and I've learned so much from him. So definitely a great choice.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm. And are there any courses that you've really enjoyed or that you've completed recently?
Look, actually, I haven't really. I mean, only really things relating to, say, what I'm doing with design, and it's more very specific stuff to do with software, mastering, some 3D rendering software. Always working on, improving my CAD drawing software program because, it makes life easier, it makes it more interesting, and it also makes it more efficient. I did do a philosophy course a little while ago, which was very interesting. But yeah, that's pretty much it lately.
Yes, I don't think we've had a lot of chances to do new courses recently, but hopefully we're sort of ramping up now.
Fair bit of stuff online. I've been brushing up on French. Well, when I say brushing up my very beginner French because my son has a very beautiful girlfriend who's French. So that was fun to try when I went over there recently.
It's always good, I think, to have something that you're working towards, not just learning the language just cause.
Yes.
It's so much easier, like if you have a reason. Yeah.
Oh, it is. It is. It's really good, and it's good. Well, for me, I take those things pretty lightly. I find it hilarious as I listen to myself saying things and just sort of crack up laughing, thinking that was so wrong. But you never get there if you don't try. And I did find the French people to be
Exactly.
so accommodating of the language, contrary to their reputation. So yeah, was worth it.
Yeah, I found that if you tried, then they would speak English to you or they wouldn't mind. But if you didn't try, then they didn't like it.
Well, I
So
think
I
that
think,
just makes
yeah.
perfect sense. I think it's
Mm,
totally understandable that you would assume that why would you assume that you land in someone's country and they need to instantly convert to your way of speaking, let alone thinking. So it just seems ridiculous to me to go to somebody's country and expect them to speak your language. They're just incredibly polite that they actually and accomplished to be able to do it themselves. So yeah.
yes, definitely. And I think we definitely expect that in Australia where people come and they speak our language. So why wouldn't they think that if we go to their country, I guess?
Yeah, it's arrogance actually.
Mm,
You're fortunate to be in their country in the first place. So yeah. Anyway, they were very
yeah.
accommodating. That was really lovely. So yeah,
Mm, yeah. Glad to know that you had a good time as well.
yeah.
So we'll move on to the interview next. So how would you define home organization?
I think that I would define home organization as a system that caters to the level of organization that suits the individual and no more than that. So basically, the lowest bar you could find that will get you out the door with the most convenience.
Hmm. That's a really lovely. Most people think of it as, having everything in boxes and everything really ordered, but I think that's a really nice way to think of it, that it's whatever works for the individual.
I think that that's really critical, and I think that what you were saying is what most people have as a misconception of organization. And I think it's extremely unhelpful because, A, putting things in boxes is actually storage rather than organization, and they're not the same thing. And when you think about how we are all different people and the way we might, everything we do, everything, our daily routines, what we eat, how we think, which way our brains operate, there is no way there is one form of organization that suits every individual. So that's why for me, it is that realizing that actually all organization is about is enabling you to do what you need to do. And for some people, it's going to be everything in neat little boxes with pink little ribbons around them. And for other people, it's just a giant basket that works for them. So it's actually identifying how people operate and what they need and how complex their life is and how complex their needs are, because that's dependent on space, time, and stuff.
So what are some other misconceptions that people have about home organization?
I think there would be a lot, and I don't know what everyone's misconceptions might be, but I think similar to my last point, but different, I think people think being neat is virtuous. And that's again, a really unfair thing because often I'm working with couples, but it wouldn't really matter whether it's couples. But but I see it with couples because some people are inclined naturally toward neatness and that makes them feel comfortable. And it actually does represent organization for them and it actually does work for them. But neatness doesn't necessarily represent organization. And sometimes what happens for those people who are not that neat, they're kind of victimized a little bit by people who, have this conception that neatness equals good or neatness equals efficient or neatness equals organization. So I think the misconception that I would like to debunk is neatness is just a personal preference, but it isn't a virtue. Other than that, other misconceptions? Yes, a huge one. People say you can never have too much storage. I totally disagree with that. I think that, it might seem, counterintuitive since what I do is design storage, but I believe you really can have too much storage because what happens is it encourages people to be non-selective. It's like, okay, I've got all this storage now. When I move, I'll just stick all this stuff in a box and I'll store it there. And really, all that does is it stays there most of the time until the next move, and it never gets used. So I think what that also is doing is it's consuming real estate. It's making a larger footprint. Everyone's using up a much larger footprint than they really need to. All they really need to do is just make a decision about what they want to do. And life is easier when you only have what you really need. I mean, I'm not going to, I'm not all about if you want to be a minimalist, great. But the thing about more storage, no, be selective, because apart from anything else and what I just said, you have a very boring home if all you have is wall-to-wall storage. It's much nicer to be selective and say, actually, all I really need is a low piece here, and I can then have my vase of flowers or my artwork above it, and I have the storage underneath that. Big boxes of storage are very boring to look at.
Does this idea that does keeping everything and having lots of storage also contribute to the idea of wardrobe chaos?
Yes, it does. I guess that's a mindset. So it's all easier said than done. And I really get that. So for anybody that's listening, I think firstly, don't be overly idealistic. I do not have my house perfectly organized all the time. I have bits and pieces that I don't need. But I think the ideal situation is try not to let that accumulate. We have times in our life where we can't manage. If you set up a system, and this is what I do really believe in, is setting up a system, which actually really it's the thinking behind it. Before you actually organize your storage, this is what I do. This is what people pay me for. It isn't rocket science. It's actually just taking the time to think first. So it's thinking, what do I have? How does my life work? And how do I need this to support me? And then, keeping that system so that, oh, now I've forgotten what the question was.
So I was just wondering if wardrobe chaos was related to the idea of having too much stuff and keeping everything.
Yes. Okay. So it is what I was saying there. So yes, the chaos is a result of not thinking first why you're doing what you're doing, and then not setting the system up to support that. So yes.
Okay. So what causes wardrobe chaos is not thinking about a system and not following the system. Is that correct?
You shouldn't even really need to worry about following the system if you set a system up really well, because it will dictate to you. And that's where that, use is in setting it up properly in the first time, which is before you actually set it up. Now, I understand the normal thing for most people to do, if they haven't engaged someone like me, is to think, okay, I have all this stuff. I need a place to put it. Where am I going to do it? And they will think about it. Obviously, a good percentage of people will think about how they're going to set it up to begin with, but they haven't really allocated a lot of time and thought to that because it's boring. I mean, thinking about this stuff is actually really dead boring. But in order to set it up properly, you've got to step back. It's like packing a car to go on a holiday. If you were going on a huge road trip with a family of people and you need the bikes and you need the camping gear and you need the snorkels and you need swimsuits, you need the dog food, all these different things, you go, okay, you're thinking about it from a space point of view and how do you fit that in? But if you don't think about, well, which thing am I going to use first? Which thing can I fit into this different space? How many times will I need to move things in order to get to the thing I need first? You're actually creating another problem. So it's the same with the wardrobe. It's, yes, I need to get all my stuff in, but actually, how do I use my things? Do I use all of my shoes all of the time? Which things do I use most of the time? If you're putting things that you use most of the time right in the critical space, you're going to find it easier. So anyway, I'll let you ask another question because there'll be lots of specifics.
This reminds me of something I did when I first moved in to my apartment, not related to wardrobes, but I put all of our plates in the most inconvenient place above our sink and in front of some other things. And when I tried to pull them down, I actually knocked over a bunch of stuff and broke things. And so that was sort of reminding me what you were saying, which is you need to put the things that you use all the time in a place that's easy to access. So
Yes.
what other things should you think about? So I guess you said putting things that you use all the time in a place that's easy to access. What other
Yeah.
things should we be doing, I
Okay,
guess?
yeah. So that's right. No, that's a really good analogy about the kitchen. And also what you're doing if you're unpacking a house is you're kind of taking that stuff in the order that it comes rather than doing that step back and doing this planning beforehand. So the things I think it's easy. One of the easiest ways to work out how to do it is to think about what doesn't work for you currently, and think about what has not worked for you in the past. So why are you in a mess? I mean, I'm assuming. So there, as I said before, there are different people. So this part mainly might apply to people who are not more into getting it right in the first place, and they've tried and they've sort of set up a system and it didn't work. And it's like, so then look at which bits are not working. Typically, unfortunately, it's because the system isn't set up correctly. So you need to think about the things that are problems are usually shoes. You can't find the shoes. Now, why is that? Or the shoes are in a mess. Why is that? Well, a few reasons. We have lots of different pairs of shoes. So unlike underwear or socks, where often we're like, look, it's a pair of socks, it's a pair of socks, I'll grab it. It doesn't really matter. With the shoes, you do want the specific pair of shoes. And they're small and they come in pairs. So we need them organized in a way that we can actually see them. So the smaller the object that is with the highest frequency use, we need to have those things closest to our eyes and hands, which is the opposite to the way most people do it. So most people will put the shoes down the bottom because really wardrobes are designed in a pretty crap way. So that's basically just relegated to that big flat space at the bottom. So this is a bit of an ideal, but if possible, we want those shoes where we can see them so that we can select. And I think of them a little bit like a library. If you're going to go and select a book, you want a very specific book. You need those books to be stored really close to where you can see them, or otherwise in a place you can stand back and kind of look down. So like in a bookshelf, you would be able to see the lowest book because there's not a whole lot of things hanging out above them. In a wardrobe, you have the shoes at the bottom, but those deep clothes are hanging all over them and you can't see them. So that's the problem with the shoes. Same thing will apply. So the solution would be shelves up high, or maybe something on the back of a door in those pockets, or even a bookshelf actually works brilliantly with shoes. Just add some extra shelves for them. Does work really well because it's shallow, so you don't have other things in the way. So that's that
And
example. Sorry, go.
oh, I was just going to say, if you've got nice shoes, like pretty shoes, it becomes like a statement almost,
Yeah, well,
where you
yes.
can, these are my expensive, I don't know, shoes, docs.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. I mean, that's the point of buying them.
yeah.
I mean, people that, want to buy their beautiful shoes, they do want to see them. And, often when you're going out, you're in a bit of a hurry and sometimes you can't find them. So, they've been totally wasted. So absolutely, there's very good reasons to be able to do that. Another example of what I was saying about avoiding the chaos, there's lots and lots of ways I can, give you examples of this. So, but back to the idea of it being the small things that you need to be able to see. Jewelry is another really good example. If people are keeping jewelry in their wardrobe, it's probably the perfect example of the problem that we have in wardrobes because it's very small. Again, it's specific. And there's no point having that sort of down the bottom or at the back of a wardrobe in a box where you can't see. Those things need to be, again, as really close to eye level, and where we can pick easily. I mean, the perfect situation for jewelry is something that's very well lit, and horizontal usually, but vertical's okay for necklaces and things like that. So a drawer, and a nice flat sort of layout. If you can't have drawers, then some sort of, shelves, even if you had like a flat tray that you slide out, multiple levels, just like you do your cutlery drawer. You don't want a whole lot of cutlery on top of each other, and you don't want it in a big chest. You want it in a nice shallow drawer. So anything that is small and specific, it may be your underwear, but jewelry, ties, belts, scarves, things like that you need to select specifically, have them in that mid-range close to your eyes and hands.
So again, would something like hanging it on the back of the wardrobe, that would work that would work well, at least for necklaces and things like that?
Yeah, I was
Mm.
asking you previously about who will be listening to this. I explained
Mm-hmm.
that a lot of my clients, they're high net worth individuals, and we're doing the luxury bespoke design. So we may not choose to do that for them because they may not like the noise that it makes about flapping about. But, we've got a lot of different people listening. So for people that they might be renting, or they may be looking for a make good with what they've got. Yes, hooks on the back. We're really talking about vertical surfaces, which is really valuable in storage. And so, getting back to that point about the things that we really need to see, you quickly run out of space on the shelving because we're trying to put so many things in that really valuable space. So, making the use of vertical space on the back of doors, or even in a hallway, is a great way to make good use of that. And they only take up a little bit of space. It's a very quick, easy DIY.
Yeah, I actually have a little hanging I'm not even sure what it is, but I put all my earrings on it so I can see all
Yep,
the earrings.
yep,
And it means
perfect.
that I can actually look at them and go, oh, that's what I want to wear today. And then I can go pick them out. My only problem is I take them out and then I leave them on the coffee table.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, that's what we call normal. And as we were saying before, that is part of the design. You're designing that stuff in the system, and then you're being acceptable of your personality. So the
Mm-hmm.
system is there, and obviously it's not going to work if you don't use it. But you leave it on the coffee table, so you do that when you clean up. But at least you know where they go when you put them away. That's probably the critical thing. So not so much in trouble because you didn't do it, but if you have that system set up, you do
Mm-hmm.
know that when you take that 10 seconds when you can feel like it to go and put them away, what you're not going to do is put them where they don't belong so that then you can't find them. You actually know where they belong. So it's like, oh, look, that's fine. I can pick that up as I go, and I know where they go, and it's done. We've eliminated that thinking, buffering time, which ends up putting things in that literal too hard basket, which ends up being a pile of mess, which ends up being, I don't want to go there because it's too much of a big job now. So
What about some other small or like oddly shaped things, but that we don't use as often? For example, things like hats and scarves, gloves for like winter. What do you
yep,
recommend for those types of items?
sure. So I'm going to come back to that. I just want to make sure that there's a whole lot of other good storage ergonomics that I should talk about. But
Mm-hmm.
the little
Sure, we
things
can
that
do
you're
that.
talking, yep, that's fine. So the little things like hats, gloves, what was it? Hats, gloves, and what was the other thing?
Scarves?
Scarves. Okay. All right. Okay. So these are the things that we work out where they go once we've done the main part of whatever storage system we're doing. So whether it's a wardrobe, or whether it's a walk-in wardrobe, or whether it's just a make-do rack, like hooks or whatever it is that you've got, usually we need to accommodate the large, bulky items first. That doesn't mean they get the best
Mm-hmm.
spot, but it means we have to actually work out where they're going to go. So typically, things like your hats, scarves, and was it belts? Hats, scarves,
Gloves or
and
belts.
gloves.
Just
Gloves.
those are just some options.
So, I'm having trouble with gloves because so few people have them. Okay, they're the things that we go. Okay, now that we've accommodated all of those big bulky things that we're using all the time, where are we going to put these things? Because yes, hats tip, they will fit. So all of those objects, except for the gloves. Let me get rid of gloves because I'm going to continue to forget about them because they're probably not used very often. If someone really likes gloves and they have quite a few of them, if they didn't have enough space to have a drawer specifically for them, or a section of a drawer specifically for them, I would actually put them into a little container, like a little basket of some sort, and just have a designated area on a shelf for them. It doesn't even really matter if it does end up kind of behind stuff, because as long as, when I say behind stuff, I don't mean pile a whole lot of stuff there, but it could be just a little designated spot for you that's not what I'd call that high use critical area. Because the thing is, if you've gone about that and you've thought about it, You know that your gloves are in that basket. You know that you could go and grab them. So it could be right up the top in that shelf that most of the time you don't reach, or somewhere else. They're quite small, so they'll fit in anywhere. But actually giving them a container to go into will mean they don't get jumbled up with everything else. Actually, that's a good analogy there is like when you're packing a suitcase to go away. And, if you do the simple way of packing where you've got a whole lot of black stuff, you find very quickly, oh, that was a good idea, but now I can't see which thing is which in my suitcase. What I do with my suitcase, and lots of people now have the same idea, is using lots of little sections. So there's little satchels or bags or whatever it is, and this is my gloves, and this is the underwear, and this is the socks, and this is my tops, and this is, so that rather than trying to rummage through everything. So same thing for the gloves, a little basket for the gloves. It's like, I know where my gloves are, they're in that little basket, and that's going to be there. So that solves them. The scarves, there's lots of different types of scarves. So you've got your foldable scarves, and then you've got your loose, soft scarves that sort of drape. So these are really important to store in a way that, again, like the shoes, we can see them because they're an accessory. And what happens is they kind of go into that non-essential part of the wardrobe, as we're walking out the door. If we can't find the scarf we're looking for, it's like, oh, whatever. So you want it where you can see it. So kind of depends on whether someone's got a lot or a little. If someone has a lot of scarves, the foldable ones I put on a shelf because they do fold quite neatly, and then you can stack them and you can see them easily and grab them. Again, ideally, if you've got the space at eye height is lovely, but you might do that as a seasonal swap because they're more wintry ones. The type that you drape over, I find always, again, we want to be able to see them. Back of the doors is fantastic. I have devised this very unglamorous, very easy DIY and effective, and I use it for my high-end clients because it's so good. There's the old, I don't know if you're going to know what it is, but stretch wire. So it used to be used for little cafe curtains in kitchens. So it's this springy wire covered in vinyl, and you can stretch it out, and it has two little hook and eye type screws. You can drill it into the back of it, or you can just screw it into the back of a door, or you can put it on a little panel on a wall. And the great thing is basically you just tuck your towels over and they loop, your scarves. It's like a towel, a bit like a towel rack, but it's a stretchy wire. And the great thing is you just stack your scarves straight in there and they won't fall off because it sort of springs back. Because the tricky thing with scarves is they're slippery. So if you were just to put them on a fixed bar, they slide off. But putting them on this, they sort of spring back. So I do have pictures of those, I think, on my website you can have a look at. Really easy DIY. So that's great. Hooks are okay, but with scarves, they're so delicate. You want to make sure that you don't have anything that's sharp that they're going to catch on. So basically, storing them vertically is great. A nice wide space is fantastic. And don't forget, you can go 2 levels, just like you do with double hanging. The other option is in a drawer. So here is just looking, what options people have available to them. They might have a drawer, and you might choose to section that drawer so that they don't all jumble up amongst each other. There are also slide-out scarf racks, which work nicely from the point of view of probably more with a proper wardrobe setup where you've got vertical partitions. You can have a scarf rack that slides in and out, basically on a runner. But you don't get as many on those. Like you pay a lot more for the scarf rack. My $2 solution is honestly the best anyone can do because you fit everything on. It's unlimited. It works really well. So that was it. Scarves. Hats. Here it depends on the type of hat and how much people wear them. Again, they go very well on hooks on a wall. So they're often a great thing. Same with the scarves. It might be in a hallway, like if you're trying to find places to put things, hallways are great for these little objects because they don't take up very much space and then you can see them. So it might be the end of a walk-in wardrobe or it might be the back of the door. So I like hooks just because it sort of separates everything out. It's actually a little bit easier and you tend to remember where they go. But shelving works well for hats too. And because you don't need to fold them, you can actually put them up high and you can kind of, to whatever height you can reach. If your hat's up there, you can grab it. You don't need to actually carefully fold it. So they're kind of a good thing to put up the top there. And I guess another thing for people that have got quite limited wardrobes, just a box on a shelf can work well as well.
Yeah, that's good because we have a lot of baseball caps for my partner, and they just sit around the house, and
Yeah.
I put them in one spot, and then he wears it, and then it's in a different spot. And I'm always trying to find a place for them, but I don't really know where to put them. So I'm gonna see if I can find some hooks and maybe put them in the hallway. I think that's
Well,
a great
yeah. So,
idea.
I mean, yeah, that's right. And I mean, you can go and get, a ready-made, row of hooks. Like if you want a really simple solution, you can go down to your local hardware, and there's often, a long plank of wood with just some hooks along it. And again, like I said, don't think you have to just do one. You can do one up there, and if it's baseball caps, you could have a whole series of these rows of hooks on a plank, and it can look quite nice.
Hmm.
The other
Yeah,
thing
maybe we'll
with
start
that is
collecting baseball caps. Hmm.
yeah, well, yes, yes, yes. One thing about baseball caps, they actually stack very well on top of each other. So if he's not fussed about which one he wears, I find that quite a few men are quite happy to have quite a few on top of each other on a row. They actually look pretty neat when they're all stacked up because they're very consistently shaped. So it's kind of good. Now the solution with the thing being left around is a bit like I was saying about your jewelry. Talk to him. Like if you don't ask a person, so this is my thing about working with people and understanding how they live, and making life like organization easy for them. Typically you've got the dressing gown that sits on the back of the chair, or someone's come home from work and they just throw their clothes on the couch, or it's just sitting there and it drives the other person mad. The reason they do that usually is they kind of know they're going to wear it again. And they don't really, it just doesn't make sense to that person to think, well, I'm going to wear it again. I don't really want to go hang it up. It just takes too much effort. So hooks are great for that. So, like it's whether it's the clothes that you wear to go out and walk the dog, or whether it's just, whatever you're going to wear again tomorrow, it's ridiculous, but it's true. We don't want to hang that up on a coat hanger. So just providing a hook. And so for his hat, it's like, okay, if we put a hook over here, would you remember to put your hat on it? And would you be willing to? And if the person says yes, then okay, great. So we don't need to worry about it. If they say no, well, then you have other issues you need to resolve, I suppose, and find out what works for you, what works for you.
Do a bit more brainstorming between the both of us, I think, in that case.
Yeah, it's got to make sense for them, and
Hmm.
simply making it easy. So obviously that hook needs to be very close. It's a bit like being a traffic cop. If the hat is sitting there, you need to put the hook somewhere near to where that hat tends to go, because if you put the hook, 5 rooms away, it isn't going to happen. So yeah,
Hmm.
using those things as sort of evidence of where you need to place the storage is a good thing.
Hmm. So you also mentioned that you had some other items that you wanted to explain how to put them
Yeah,
away. So what are they?
yeah. So this is not so much how to put them away. This is why wardrobes get messy. And like
Hmm.
you said in the title, or what I like to think of is, like people genuinely want to get organized and they want their wardrobe tidy, and they wonder why, after tidying it in, a month, it's a mess again. And that's when I kind of go, it's not you, it is the wardrobe. So it's difficult for people that are in all sorts of different situations to apply. I can't give solutions for every kind of situation, so I'll just explain the principles, and then I'll try to give some examples of what people can do at different levels to achieve these. Essentially what you want to do is, it's back to what I was saying about making it easy. Something that I think about when I'm designing these spaces is what people are doing when they go into their wardrobe. There's two things. People think about storage, so they think, I want to be able to get that object easily. But what they fail to remember is someone also has to put that object back. And that object has to find its way back into that space. And if the more you can think about the getting it back in than the getting it out, the better you'll be at designing the space. Bit like, we don't have, the drinks end up still left on the kitchen bench because people wanted their drink, they had their drink, and then they just dumped it there. We need to get the drink from that bench back into the fridge, and it's the same with the wardrobe. So people are coming back from the laundry with a whole bunch of stuff. They don't have, 2 hands free. So the simpler we can make the process, the more willingly they will adopt it and more successful it'll be. So however you're setting your system up, always be thinking, how hard is it for me to put my objects away? So I think of doing only 2 to 3 movements per thing. So if I need to put my jumper away on its shelf, bending is one movement, placing it is another movement. So if I need to bend, place, and move something else, that's going to be a problem. I'm not going to be able to do it. So the system needs to be set up so that it's basically a quick fold and put it in, and then no rearranging anything around it. So the shelves need to be the same width and the same depth as the garment that is going onto them. If you don't do that, what will happen is something will move to the back and then something sits in front of it. And then when you want to put your things away or to grab them, you're doing this kind of thing. And that's where most wardrobes kill people's level of organization, because the standard wardrobes, standard timber cut sheets or sheet cuts give you shelves that are 45 centimeters wide and 45 centimeters deep. And jumpers and t-shirts are 30 centimeters wide and 38 centimeters deep. So the trick is make your spaces the right size for the garment. It's not so easy, working with an existing system, but that's sort of what you need to aim for. So you don't want to have to be doing weird folding. You just want to be able to fold normally, pop it on there, and that's it. Nothing behind. The next thing is all of the small stuff, so the folded gear and all of that stuff from waist to eye height. So what do you do with the space underneath that? That's where the hanging goes. So it's very easy to see a coat, a shirt, or a skirt, when you look down on it, because it's on the coat hanger and it's sticking out. So use that bottom space, and then you never have to bend down. If you've got to bend down, that's already that movement. It's also dark, you can't see it. So it's too difficult. So this idea of having hanging up here and then shelves underneath, it doesn't work. If you are stuck with a wardrobe and you can't make the changes and you've got this, hanging rack up the top, the best you can do is what most people do, is put drawers underneath. That is at least going to make use of that space. So the idea is no bending, no reaching, no weird folding. So try to organize the space within what you've got to fit the clothing that you've got. So if I think about ways to do that at different levels, the cheap DIY, or the more affordable, it's not necessarily cheap, at a DIY level, is things like your Alpha system, or it's sometimes called ventilated shelving. So they're the metal shelves that are sort of rungs and metal mesh, and they're suspended onto the back wall. They're actually really well designed for this kind of thing, because the support structure is actually designed to be that 38 centimeters roughly in depth. So when you put a garment onto that shelf, it's not going to go anywhere. What that also does is it means that you can see the clothing underneath, because it sticks out. So keeping your shelves shallow, having them close together then. So by having that shallow shelf, you can then have the shelves quite close together. So you've got more of them. You've got more segregation. So it's, my gym gear here, my jumpers here, my jeans there, or however you want to do it, rather than a big shelf with like all of that all in the one space. I probably should stop because that was a lot of talking. Do you have any questions on that at this point?
No, but it definitely explains, number one, why I never hang up my hanging clothes, because I have to find the hangers, put them on, and then put them back. And it also explains my t-shirt drawer situation, which is just a box, a cupboard, and it's just everything's thrown in there because it's way too deep now that I think about it. And things just kind of get lost in there. So thank you for explaining why it doesn't work for me.
I guess at a very simple level, it's creating more sections so that you can kind of separate them out so you can actually see them works well. If you have the opportunity to have adjustable shelves, and packing them close together with that shallower shelf makes a big difference. And then, if possible, categorizing your clothing by length. If you're tight on space, by grouping your short things together and your long things together. I think most people already do that. It just leaves you some available space as one group at the end that you can ideally it would be dresses down here and the shelves above, but often if you've got a fixed system, you're going to have to go with the dresses above and all the shirts above and the drawers underneath.
Mm. Yeah, definitely what I've got going in my wardrobe, which is I just hanging space about, eye height, and underneath I've got some shelves for my shoes. Trying to
Yeah,
use all of the space in there.
I know. It's
Um,
really, really hard when that's what you've got. And I've, like that's what most people have. It's what cheap builders do in more affordable housing. And it's really difficult to make good use of. There are actually some accessories you can buy that will give you double hanging in those wardrobes. So basically, when you've got your one pole at the top, and a lot of people have a lot
mhm.
of short clothes, and there's this dead space at the bottom, and you need more hanging. There's this thing that's a bit like a trapeze, like what the gymnast sort of uses a trapeze. So it's just an attachment. You can go and get it. You could get it online, or you could get it at a storage shop. And basically, it just hangs down from that rail and it gives you another rail that you can actually add extra hanging onto. That's really handy because even if you don't need more hanging space, you could use that for things like handbags. You could hang your handbags over it with some like butcher's hooks, bit fiddly. But yeah, if you need more hanging, it works well. And the other thing is they're not brilliant, but better than, nothing. Those hanging shoe racks or hanging, you can get, I don't know if you've seen, but they're nylon pouches basically that sit horizontally and they're like floating shelves. You can put those onto those hanging rods as well if you need more shelving or if you need more shoe space. And at least what that does is it gets them up off the floor.
Yeah, I'll have to have a look because definitely have too many shoes, and they're just kind of all piled in the closet now, as you've said,
Yeah,
happens.
yeah,
Mm,
yeah. You can get some pouches to go on the back of doors as well for shoes, which are not bad
mm.
either.
Yeah, I'll have a look for those. Um, what about, so in my wardrobe, above the hanging area, there's actually a little shelf. It's about that deep. It's about 20 centimeters tall,
Hi.
but it's very
Yeah,
deep,
yeah,
high, and it's
yep,
very deep. And then above that,
yeah.
I've got quite a bit of space above the cupboard,
Dead space.
um,
Yeah.
but it's very hard to get up there. What do you recommend I do with that space?
Okay, yeah, that's a problem many people have. So, it obviously depends on what you need to store, but you're going to put the things that you don't use very often up there. You will have probably found you can, if you happen to have some archive storage, it's not too bad if you can, get things up there. Now, I have this little trick of using that, which is a little unconventional, but it works really well. So if you pillow slips, so if you get a pillow slip and you've got clothing that you're not using very often, and the reason I use pillow slips, this is actually about storing clothing long term. So it might be that seasonal swap that people do if you're tight for space, putting your winter gear up the top in summer. It's not good for clothing to be stored in plastic. It doesn't breathe. So clothing is much better stored in fabric. So I get pillow slips, shove them really tight with whatever it is, and then you'll find you can shove them in and they'll sit right up to the ceiling. And you probably don't have that much off-season clothing, but that is a terrific way to store all the way up to the ceiling. You'll find it's around about the right height. And if you stuff them jammed full, they sit really tight like a duffel bag and they'll stand upright beautifully. So that is, I think, the best way to make use of that space. It's a really bad thing that builders do. It's their cheap way of using standard doors and just blocking it in with a cheap gyprock bulkhead. And basically, it's almost useless unless that's the best solution I've found for that kind of thing.
I'll have to go to the op shop and buy some new pillowcases. I mean, I don't have that much seasonal clothing, so I don't think I'll get it up to the ceiling. But we'll see how we go.
Well, yeah, that's right. So the problem is they've actually given you a problem. They've sort of
Hmm.
theoretically given you storage, but what they've really done is given you a problem because everyone sees this as like valuable space, but actually they might as well have just closed it off because unless you've got things like soft stuff you can put up there, you can't get it in the gap to get it up. If you've got something big, it won't fit in the gap. If it's your own
Hmm.
place, like occasionally what I'll do if I'm refitting a wardrobe for clients is I actually recess that shelf right back. So we either consider ripping out that bulkhead so that you got doors all the way to the ceiling. But that's a fairly
Hmm.
heavy cost for the loss of storage that people are suffering. So an alternative is we actually cut that top shelf right back. So your wardrobe depth is 60 centimeters. If you cut that top shelf back to say 30 centimeters, you can get more things in there. So at least you can use it. But what they've done is they've given you a deep shelf high up, so your access is this. So it's virtually, they might as well just block it in, really.
Yeah. So you mentioned storing clothes by season. Is that something everyone should do, or just that people could do if they need more space?
Yeah, it's really just a response to not having, well, either having too much stuff or too little space, whichever the cause of it is. So, but some people do like to do it. Like I do have clients, that's their way of being. They like to create, this sort of interest of separating seasons. So, yeah, personally I wouldn't, because I think clothing is better when it's out in the being aired rather than cramped up and squashed into a space. But definitely, if that's if you're short of space, it's just logical.
Mm. You mentioned also you think clothes should be able to breathe. Is that another reason why we should keep everything nicely organized, so that I guess we keep the clothes in good order?
I think it's definitely a reason. I mean, depending on what your humidity level is like, but the more humid the conditions you're living in, the more susceptible you're going to be to having mold and dust mites and all of those sorts of issues. So, that's the other thing about, sometimes similar to the space you were talking about with the closed in section at the top. Some of those wardrobes also have a closed in section at the end. And often people find those clothes, I mean, they don't even know what's in there because they can't see it, but it's getting moldy. So, yeah, I mean, anything that's sitting around for a long time, it's going to collect dust if it's not collecting mold. That just generates more dust mites. So, yeah, better to keep it ventilated, definitely.
Mm. What are some misconceptions about wardrobe organization?
I don't look. I guess misconceptions. I am not a fan of sort of like novelty storage items, because I find it kind of really annoys me. People are just, I guess, to me, people just want to sell something. They want to make some money out of it. And actually, at the end of the day, they're not really thinking about the planned obsolescence sort of mentality. There's so many different, like, shoe racks. I hate shoe racks. I mean, they don't work. The number of shoe racks that are at the bottom of wardrobes where people they end up not using them. It's probably 95%. Same with like little shoe gadgets where you're going to put one shoe this way and one shoe that way. I mean, nobody can be bothered. It looks great in the storage shop, but it's just a whole lot of plastic that ends up in landfill. So I guess the misconception is, just because it's in a storage shop doesn't mean it's actually organization. It just is something that is going to give the storage shop profit. It's not necessarily going to save you space or make your life easier. So at any point that you are looking at something, remember, will I really use it? Choose it on your laziest day, and remember that you're not going to crawl around and reorganize everything like that. So probably you're just wasting your time and space. Trouser racks are another one of mine, that I most of the time see them just as a dead space in wardrobe. When I go to design people's places, the wardrobe will be full and the trouser rack is empty, and it's using up this huge part of these wardrobes. And it's like, why is it empty? And that's what made me realize what doesn't work in wardrobes is the one-sided equation of, oh, look, that looks great. I can grab my trousers. They're just there. They're really easy. But they're not thinking about, well, what happens when those trousers go to the laundry? And then who's bringing them back from the laundry? What are they bringing them back on if they've ironed them? They're bringing them back on a coat hanger. So when the person goes to put them away, they're now like, oh, they're on a coat hanger. I'll just stick it on the rod. And so then they never put them in the trouser rack, because that's another action. So it's too fiddly and it takes too long to thread them through. So these misconceptions about, little novelties that are actually going to make your life easier. It's just like the appliances in your kitchen cupboard that you thought looked like a great idea that just sits in the back of the cupboard and never gets used. So, avoid novelties, I think.
Um, Are there any, is there anything you recommend that everyone should do in their wardrobe?
Get rid of stuff they don't use. I think that's the only thing that I can say that applies to everybody. Otherwise, I do really think it's great to actually be kind to yourself and realize that your version of the right wardrobe is actually going to be very specific to you. So the only thing I can think of that applies to everyone is just get rid of stuff you're not using.
Yep, I think everyone nowadays has, well, not everyone, a lot of people nowadays have a lot of things that they're not wearing. So, what's a practice that you do in your own home to keep your wardrobe organized?
Well, that is kind of a fairly straightforward one for me, and the luxury of having applied what I've been talking about it comes back to I have made my shelves like firstly I calculate what I really need in all of the different categories of clothing. So X amount of long hanging, X amount of 3/4, X amount of jeans. How do I like hanging and folding? Which things do I want to hang and fold? Um, and which things do I need to compromise on? Because even for me, I don't necessarily have a huge wardrobe. So I might, in theory, I might need 7 meters of lineal hanging, but I don't have it. So which things would I like to hang that I'm willing to fold because that'll actually compact some of the space. So really thinking about ratios, and then allocate those shelves. It's like, okay, now I know I have this amount of stuff. I'm going to have my jumpers. So do I want to have 5 narrow ones here or 3 wider ones? What's going to work? Then having made them the right depth. Honestly, it's absolutely true that my wardrobe is really efficient. I don't need to tidy it because I've applied all of those systems. So there isn't really a practice required. It is simply dresses go there, jeans go there. And it's not because I'm really pedantic about it. It's just because that's the place that's been allocated for them. It fits them. They sit in there. So they're like neat little sheep in their corrals. They just stay there. They've got nowhere to go. So I don't actually really need any personal practice with it.
That's great. I guess it's so good to, I mean, obviously it's going to work for you because you spent the time and effort thinking about it. But it's, I guess, nice to see that it's working and that you really don't have to do anything. There's no practice involved once everything is organized properly.
Absolutely. It should be the same as a well-designed kitchen. If you go into your friend's kitchen and they're pretty typical, you can probably put 80% of their stuff away at the end of a party without asking them where it goes, because you'll automatically know cutlery goes there, pots are going to go there. There'll be a few things like, oh, where does this go? It should be the same in the wardrobe so that someone else could basically go, oh, I get it, I see where all that goes, that's kind of easy. And then you've taken away that brain drain that stops you from being organized. This is easier said than done, though, because I have a custom design wardrobe. So, if I didn't have the luxury of that, I would be struggling with all of those things that we'd said before, and I'd be making those changes, like adding in little floating shelves and hooks wherever I can, and spreading things out so that you're using the vertical, surface area, basically.
So we do have some questions from the audience.
Oh, okay, cool.
Is that okay?
Yes.
Yeah. So the first question is, what are the things I should consider when organizing my closet?
Okay, well, it will be think about all of the different activities that you do in relation to your clothing, and which things you use most often, and then look at the space that you have and try to allocate the things that you use most often to the most easily accessible and visible areas. It's really hard to say without seeing that person's actual space they've got, but that's the principles of it. And don't be over idealistic about how you're going to do these things. Imagine you're going to have to get these things out of your wardrobe when you are exhausted and over it, and your day has been, your week has, had too many chores in it already. So don't be thinking you're going to do all this little weird folding and little things under here and there, because it won't happen. So keep it really simple.
Our second question is it a good practice to combine children's and adults' clothing in one giant closet?
It really depends on your lifestyle. So there isn't there, like I said before, I don't believe for a moment that there's only one way to do things. So the answer to that would be, well, why would you ask that question? So is it that you only have one wardrobe? Is it that I've designed one entire family's wardrobe in one space because that family felt that they wanted to do their laundry and then put their clothing away directly in the laundry. So they actually just had an enormous walk-in wardrobe around the laundry, so that one person wasn't going and putting everything away. It's like, just here's your stuff, there's your wall of stuff. So it's whatever makes sense for the individuals and the space and the limits that they have. So there's no reason not to, if it makes sense to that person.
That actually makes sense to have, I guess, a closet in one area, so you're not having to, take all the laundry and put them away in all these different parts of the house. That makes a
That's
lot of sense,
all part.
actually.
That's all part of what we were saying in the beginning about,
Mm.
before you design the space, think about what is going on, why are you doing it, is there a better way to do it, do I need a wardrobe at all in my bedroom? Yes. What are the different ways to do it? And when you start to challenge the way you do things and think, why am I doing it, what do I actually need, you can create whatever you can. Really think of it in a more creative way, in a much more sort of I don't know, just responsive to your own environment, and adapt it to what you've got. I mean, for example, depending on what person's circumstance is, fridges make fantastic storage cabinets if you've got nothing else. They're perfectly well sealed. I mean, they're not ventilated, but thinking about, you don't have to store things the way things are typically done. At the end of the day, whatever makes sense for you. And if that family has, children, the kids can have their stuff at the bottom, which is a perfect height for them if they're little, and then the adults get all this premium space. So that could be a very creative way to actually eliminate that problem of the adults bending and the children reaching.
Yeah, I love that. Adapting for everyone's needs.
Yep.
So this is a question that I came up with, as I guess I'm the first audience.
Mm-hmm.
Has fast fashion increased people's wardrobes? Has it affected
Well,
people's wardrobes?
Well, I guess the answer to that will be, the only honest answer I can give to that is people's wardrobe requirements have definitely increased. Like over time. It used to be that, one couple, like back in the 80s, an average wardrobe was 2.4 meters long. Now the average wardrobe that I would do would be like 9 meters. Like, just as an average, that would be 9 meters in a walk-in wardrobe. So I can't say whether it's fast fashion. That's probably a question for other people who are selling the clothing, as to say whether people would be buying that amount of clothes if it wasn't fast fashion or not. But certainly the clothing has increased.
Yes, I was living in an old house, and I got the master bedroom because they had built another master bedroom, which was bigger for my parents.
Yeah.
And the wardrobe for two people, two adults, was probably about 50 centimeters wide.
Yes.
And it was like, how do you even put your clothes in there? This is for two adults.
Yeah. Well,
I had to be really selective with what I put in there personally.
yeah, that's very small. I mean, in the old days, there weren't wardrobes at all. It was just a chest. But in the old days, people didn't both go to work, and it was very different. So it's definitely increased over time, and it is a challenge for people in older homes because their bedrooms are really not designed for the amount of clothing that most people have. It's a big challenge.
Mm.
But when you think about it, we also wear a lot more clothes that, like, not only, are people wanting more of a range, people do a lot of activities. People go to the gym, they go out to a lot of functions, they have a lot of hobbies, and a lot of these hobbies have different clothing associated with them. So, we didn't used to have, triathlons wearing their triathlon kit gear, 50 years ago. They just wore the t-shirt and shorts, the same t-shirt and shorts. So that comes into it as well.
That's true. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, definitely a lot of variation in what I wear a lot of how I choose what I can wear that day depends on what I'm doing that day.
Yeah,
And if I don't have clothes that fit what I want to do, then I'll buy something else.
yeah, yeah, yeah. They didn't used to do it in the days of those
Mm.
people who had that tiny little wardrobe. They just had, one garment, and they
Yeah.
probably didn't do all those activities.
Mm. So we'll do the open mic now. So that's where you get a chance to talk
Yep.
about something that you're passionate about, but it doesn't have to be related to our topic. So what did you want to talk about today?
Look, I think that probably just keeping it on topic, I don't have anything that I especially need to discuss otherwise with the audience. I think to be thinking about, I mean, to some extent, we've already covered it. Thinking about storage from the point of view of reusing what you already have, and remembering that you can repurpose objects around the home. If you buy modular furniture, you can pack it up and take it away with you often. Especially that really flat pack stuff like the Alpha or the ventilated shelving, anything on fitted to the wall with sort of racking is great. Um, but repurposing things like old cabinets, old dining, pieces of furniture, boxes, floating boxes on walls can look super interesting. Just creating shelving sections here and there can be really great ways of storing, whatever luggage you've got, or fixing up your garage with just a whole lot of hooks and all that sort of stuff. So I think the point there is you don't have to go and buy something new. You can repurpose, suitcases and bits of wood and old doors and all sorts of things into, creative pieces of storage around the home.
That's great. And I definitely, I got most of my furniture off the side of the road because I was like, well, people are throwing this
Yep.
out. And so I definitely love
Yep.
the idea of reusing what we have and,
Yeah.
reducing, I guess, what we're spending our money on. Mm.
Yeah, and you end up with a more interesting home as well, because it's not going to look generic. If you pick something up off the side of the road, then suddenly you've got something that's got a totally different texture and a different mode. So yeah, I think it's a good way to go. Actually, the other thing I was saying to you yesterday was thinking about not filling the house with storage so that you've got, a more interesting space. That goes back to that point about, there you can have too much storage. If you look around really interesting homes, they're not all across one plane. There's horizontal, vertical, different depths and dimensions. So, thinking about when you're doing your storage, it's like, well, actually my shoes, if I took my shoes out of the wardrobe, or some of the smaller objects, I could actually put them in that little low credenza in the living room, and I can have a lovely piece of art over the top of that, and then I might have more space in my wardrobe. So being really selective about how big an object is and what amount of storage that actually needs. And what you'll do then is you'll actually find the house becomes more interesting, because instead of big blocks of boxes that are all the same size, you'll get, different little elements of height, depth, and yeah, makes it more interesting.
And I guess if you have the things, you like them. And so you want to display them as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It
Mm.
just it's much more interesting.
Mm. So if people want to find out more about you, where should they go?
Well, I have two websites. They can have a look on the website. They can also have a look on House. So it's my newer website is, what is it? I think it's just sallyhart.com.au. That's got all sorts of design work that I've done throughout the entire home, and kitchens, bathrooms, living rooms, and dressing rooms. If they want more specific stuff about wardrobes and closets, then they can go to cleverclosetcompany.com.au.
Great. And I'll put both of those links in our show notes for people to find as well. Thank you for joining me. It was really great to talk to you.
Thanks, Gabriella. Lovely to talk to you as well. I hope the audience found it helpful.
I'm sure they did. I think this was gave some really great practical advice and also options for people. So I think I personally will be taking some of this home and implementing it. I'm looking at the baseball hats.
I hope it works.
You've been listening to Room by Room, produced by the Home Organisation Science Labs, a division of LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. More episodes like this from across 10 life management perspectives can be found by searching LMSL on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube, and any other podcasting apps available on your smart devices. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating, sharing, and subscribing to our channel, as it helps other people to find it so we can grow and continue to bring you quality resources. More of our work can be found on our website, ho.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Gabriella Joustra, and thanks for tuning in.